Welcome, everybody, to our latest edition of WatchBox After Hours. We've got a special treat for you today as we're going global. We've got the opportunity to connect our global markets. So we're going to do that via Zoom today and talk about what's going on in the industry and where we see things going maybe over the next month or so. So we have a special guest today from Switzerland, the center of the watch industry. We've got Patrik Hoffmann. There he is, Patrik. In Hong Kong, we've got Josh, runs our office over there. And special highlights today from the US, our founder, one of them, Danny Govberg from home on his big Zoom call. Say hey, Danny.
Hello, everybody.
And Brian, also back in the US, holding up Philly, keeping busy, keeping business going. So we're going to jump right into a couple different conversations. We're going to start with talking about the state of the industry, COVID-19 style. So I'm going to start with you, Patrik. Why don't you tell us what you see from the heart of the industry in Switzerland?
Well, you know, it's an unprecedented situation, that's for sure. And I have to give you a little bit of a rundown. It really started in January when China started to shut down. So the CEOs probably here in industry, they started to sweat. And then what happened is the Chinese New Year was coming up. China kept still in lockdown and we were missing the tourists. So Switzerland was empty. And keep in mind, for the Swiss watch industry, we always talk about the Swiss watch exports, but actually the domestic market here in Switzerland, which is driven by the tourists, is very, very important for the watch industry and for the volume. So then we heard that Watches of Wonders is going to shut down or going to be postponed. Basel postponed, the Swatch Days in Zurich postponed, and the CEOs really became more and more nervous, I'm sure, and also the sub-suppliers. And then in March 16, the government really took it in their hands, and they shut down or did a mini lockdown in Switzerland. And I can tell you, many of the CEOs in Switzerland, they were happy about this because the government basically took the decision and the CEOs could follow. And now many of those companies closed down, again, unprecedented. Patek closed down, Rolex closed down, and there is absolutely no production on many sites. And I know we are going to talk about the supply chain a bit later.
We'll dive into that in a minute.
I'll give you some numbers to really kick it in. In 1 month, only exported 900,000 timepieces. And in the past, in March last year, they exported 1.6 million. That's a number to sink in.
All right, Josh, why don't you give us a quick update on what you're seeing over in Hong Kong?
Yeah, sure. I think the most important thing from our perspective is, given this whole virus situation, thankfully in Hong Kong, our office has the ability to remain open, where many of our other offices and many other places around the world have had to shut completely. So thankfully we've got that working for us. In terms of the buying tendencies for our clients, the one main thing that we've noticed are people moving slightly away from the basic steel commodity sport pieces from different brands, starting to ask and get really interested in the more complicated pieces. And also a lot of people starting to talk and discuss and bring up conversation about what we call like the old masters, watchmaking, like the old Roger de Buis, Daniel Roth, things of that nature. So it seems to be a collector base and a lot of young guys as well getting into these really classic pieces because they present like a really fantastic value proposition to get a, one of the top tier watchmakers, complicated watch at a drastically cheaper price than some of the competitors. On top of that, anything limited edition, rare, these are really what people here are focusing their time on now.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think we're seeing the same thing in the States where people are having more time and kind of focusing in on what they really love instead of what's the hottest thing.
They're spending more time doing research.
Longer than any of us in this business. So, give us your 30-year historical view. You've been through a lot of rough times, and what do you see happening in the States?
I think what I see mostly is just how unbelievable things are operating with these Zoom calls, like from around the world. To just think that we've got Patrik on the phone, Josh on the phone, and you're sitting in your house, Brian's sitting in his house, I'm sitting in my house, and we're all talking watches. But not only talking watches, Brian's selling watches every day. Mike, you're selling watches every day.
Crazy, yeah.
I'm talking to brands. Josh is doing his thing. And I think the main thing I see is how much of the world watch community is almost coming together like a club. Like every day we have more and more people that are finding Brian and Josh and yourself and George and the others at WatchBox, guys that are home that just want to talk watches that we never knew before. And also I'm finding that people are consuming the content more than ever. Collectors, conversations, and reviews, like the numbers are just through the moon on how much consumption of content people are getting to consume while at home. So I think the watch community is actually coming together stronger than ever as a hobby and a collectible.
I've seen that myself, and I think one of the things that we're going to see is some directional changes that are going to come out of this, that we may never go back to the regular way we were doing business. And I'm saying the same thing. Everybody's more engaged. They're focusing on what we're doing, and the content has become huge.
I think this is showing that you can do successful launches and the public tunes in. And the other thing is the launches seem like they're going the direction of inclusion, meaning moving forward. It used to be a launch was for the retailer only. Now, many of the brands look like they're taking the approach that the launch is for the world at the same time. So it's merging the retailer, the brand, and the consumer into one giant party. It seems like that's coming out of this too.
Just a big party at home, unfortunately.
I don't know if that's good for us because we're middlemen on some of this situation. Not exactly WatchBox because we set the pre-owned world market, but if I was a retailer out there, I'd be a little worried about a lot of the launches that we're looking at right now.
All right, Brian, what are you seeing with collectors in the States?
That they want to engage, and I think that if you're in a position that you can engage with a collector or a client from a distance, then you're already well ahead of the pack. So whether it's Zoom calls like this or talking on the phone or being able to have access to your inventory and be able to facilitate and ship product, that's, I think, the level of service that collectors expect right now. A lot of the collectors that I've spoken to, one of the things that they're looking for in times like this is not necessarily a bargain, but what's the watch that 10 years from now that I would look back on and say, damn, why didn't I buy that watch when you told me to?
When it was available. Right?
When it was available. And everybody has that story from 08, 09, when do you remember when this was trading at this and that was trading at that? And, you say, yeah, you should have pulled the trigger then, and it's the coulda, woulda, shoulda. But I think that we're in this weird time where watches have definitely, except for the most ultra rare, watches have depreciated quite a bit in the last 6 weeks. And I think that a lot of collectors are just looking for that opportunity to pick something up that 4 weeks from now could
might be back.
Just bounce back. It's helped that there's been a steady flow of content. You've had releases that have been going on for the last several weeks. I think some brands have done better capitalizing on those releases than others. But overall, I think that it's going to be an interesting landscape when we come out of this. Some brands are going to have product to ship, some are not. I think that the best thing, as Patrik said, is that the Swiss government shut down all the factories at once, because God only knows what it would be like if some of these brands were pumping product into this market right now. If it was up to them, they'd be shipping out pieces left and right. And I think that it's good that there's scarcity right now and that products aren't flowing, and that, if you do take an order for something, that it's going to be in the future. We saw the ramifications to their, work-life schedule. We saw that they had to start coming in shifts. We had a little bit of experience with the virus before it fully came to the US. And I think that really helped us make decisions and act quickly in order to be able to best help our clients. We've always been able to operate remotely. And I think that that's one of the things.
We got lots of practice at it now.
Yeah.
You started touching on the effect it's having on the brands. I know you've got all the experience from the brands' perspective from your days at UN. Can you give us some of the challenges the brands will face now and coming out of this?
Well, let me give you the good part first. The Swiss government has implemented a very good system about 100 years ago. It's called short time. What that means now is really the opposite of a hire and fire policy. So what we try to do, or the government is trying to do for 100 years already, if a crisis comes and hits, we try to not to have to fire the people. And that has two good important parts in it, because first of all, you don't have to rehire them. And second of all, you're not going to lose know-how, because that's damaging. And we have about 700, close to 700 small and medium enterprises in Switzerland that are related to the watch business. Now, all the brands, and we always talk about the brands and the manufacturers, they all depend on those 700 sub-suppliers. And those sub-suppliers, they all come with an enormous know-how. So now, once the companies are ready, or the manufacturers are ready to switch on, and they started, a few brands, they started to work again 2 days ago. It is now important for them that the supply chain works for them, but not only internally, but also externally. It's like the car industry. I honestly don't see a huge problem there. I think there will be shortages. We would have had shortages anyway. So the hot pieces are short anyway. That has nothing to do with coronavirus. And I could now be a little bit sarcastic on my side. There might be one or the other brand or CEO who will use the coronavirus for maybe a bad management of their brand before, and maybe a mismanagement on their supply chain, which they had already. So I think as long as we come back soon, and it looks like this here in Europe and in Switzerland, and layoffs didn't happen, and Chapter 11s didn't happen in those sub-supply chains, I don't see really a problem in the supply chain. I really see it coming back relatively quickly.
Great to hear. That's great. So Brian had alluded to some of the launches, and last weekend we saw Watches and Wonders go digital. And instead of us trekking to SIHH and Watches and Wonders like we had for the last 25 years, I used to always see Danny there, and we'd hang out and talk watches. So now it's being done online. And I think overall, it was a great idea. I think it got everybody engaged. I just wanted to kind of go around and say, what does everybody think about the doing shows by technologies? Are we going to go back to Basel and to Watches and Wonders next year? Or do we think, this might be a change in the marketplace going forward? So Josh, why don't you start with you in Hong Kong? What's the reaction to Watches and Wonders been over there?
Yeah, I think it's a great thing to have the shows taking place digitally, because at the end of the day, what it does is it makes it so much more accessible to so many more people who maybe were not able to physically travel for whatever reason to the shows in Switzerland. And I think making it very cool and approachable like this also helps to target a younger demographic who's maybe just getting into watches, buying their first pieces, or slowly starting to, in the early days of their collecting.
Love it. All right, Danny, you're the big show guy. You were always the biggest personality at these shows. What do you think about it being digital as opposed to being in person with 100 appointments going on?
Again, I looked at the Watches of Wonder website, and I actually thought they did a pretty good job of the way, it's interactive and there's videos, and I thought they did a really good job, whoever put the website together. But I think the launches are nice. People are talking about it. And again, my biggest takeaway is we used to go to the shows, and besides meeting each other, which was all nice, we really went to have first dibs on seeing the product.
Right.
And I think what today shows more than ever is the world sees the product when we see the product. There's no gap. So the Watches of Wonders website is launched. The whole world gets to see it pretty much at the same time. And we're almost as surprised as the customers are. So I do think that from that standpoint, that was already here. We sort of already knew it when we were going in the last years to the shows, that we weren't necessarily first. Sometimes things even leaked, and we were getting asked for product that we didn't even know was being launched yet. So I think other than the camaraderie of getting to see, you know, a lot of friends and brand presidents and just getting to like interact with each other, that's missing. But I think with these Zoom meetings, in a way, we're getting to interact with each other in a different way is even more often and nicer. Like, this is really nice right now, getting to see
It is kind of nice.
and Josh and you and Brian's like, who needs to go to work anymore?
No, I think it definitely is going to make it harder for the retailers, but from the consumer standpoint, it's definitely, I think.
That'd be great for the consumer. They're participating and I think that the website was good, that it's only going to get better. These launches are only going to get better and better and more animated. And I think it's good for everybody.
I mean, I think that, you know, this is only year one of that website. You know, if you've been to Watches and Wonders, you see the different events that they put on, the different panels, the speakers, and I think that that's all going to eventually move over to the Watches and Wonder website so that more and more of the consumers can participate. But I think that it's going to be hard for retailers to be a part of that conversation. So there's going to be a lot of engagement from the brand to the consumer and back and forth. And before, the retailer was directly in the middle. So when something new would come out, they were giving the information, and then or the consumer would be talking to the retailer about what are they seeing. And I think now you're going to have to find a new way for the retailer to enter back into the conversation. Let's
talk products, since I know you have strong opinions and you're as deep in it as I am on the product side. So why don't you lead us out on, what were a couple of your favorite brands and what you saw on the site that you loved?
So I think overall, one of the key takeaways was, I think, just a refinement of core product. I think that seems to be a theme year over year now, taking bestsellers and tweaking them and fine tuning them and just making them, a little bit better each year. As far as brands where I was, where I really liked the release, I'd say one which I'm a fanboy of and is probably expected would be the FP Journe, the new Resonance. Just launched yesterday to big fanfare. It's already been written about on a lot of the industry publications. And it's gotten glowing reviews, not only from the collector community, but also from the watch publication community. So the watch is going to do fantastic. It's innovative. And if you want to read more about it, you can go online, but it's just fantastic. And it also happens to be the 20-year anniversary of the Resonance. So it's a big milestone, I think, for the brand. So I would say one of my underrated hits of the year, which, was a watch that came out last year that I think I absolutely loved, and it did exceptionally well, was the, and I'm going to butcher the name because I'm from Philly, but the Hermès de la Cour de la Lune, which is a watch that features two discs that move around the circumference of the dial. It has the time and the date on two different discs. And it's an effective dual moon phase. And the watch sold out completely very quickly. Hermès knew that they had a hit on their hands. The retailers that carry Hermès knew that they had a hit on their hands. But it was one of those situations where they didn't realize how great it was going to do, and then didn't make enough. It was a small edition, which ends up being the best editions when there's much more demand than available supply. So this year, they've brought the watch back, both as a limited edition, 2 dials that are 36 pieces each, one that is 2 dial, an edition of 2, which is actually Mars Meteorite, which is super cool. And then 2 pieces that are going to be normal production. And I think that this was a really great move. It's an example of a watch doing very well that's now going to become part of core. And I think you're just going to see them rotating in and out different dials in order to keep the product, tight.
Momentum going.
And selling.
Terrific. All right, Josh, favorite brand, favorite introduction from Watches and Wonders?
Yeah, I think before the watches themselves, one trend which I think we're starting to see, which is excellent news for me and a lot of the clients here in Asia, are the downsizing of watches. So for example, IWC introducing the 42 perpetual or the 40 millimeter Portuguese. I think it's super exciting and very well received here. One of my all-time favorite watch collections has always been the Cartier Privé line. And the tank asymmetric is one of the most highly sought after pieces here. It's a request we get a lot from clients. And it's super hard to find. I think yellow gold was 150 pieces originally. They reintroduced the watch in a few different variants. The skeleton is just wow. I can't wait to see that watch in person. That's actually the only piece that I've gotten multiple requests for already, other than the FP Journes. So I think Cartier did a really knockout job on those pieces.
Yeah, I agree with you on the asymmetric. Patrik, what did you see that you loved?
Well, I think it's more general of what I'm going to say. From the brand I come from, really, Snart, and we always were very much into innovation material, insight,
Right.
in the movements, silicium, and so forth. And for me, Panerai is taking that way again and is accelerating it with new materials, but more on the outside, the case, the dial, and so forth. And that jumps into my eye. I think generally, of course, I see nobody is really jumping into new waters. People are really sticking to their to what they did and to their tradition, and I think that's a good thing, particularly in these times.
I think what hit me the most was the brands kind of revamping, to Brian's point, core collections, Portugieser being the one, Luminors being in Panerai. Jaeger, I thought the Master Calendar Chrono was a great piece and priced in a really, wonderful price point, which I thought was accessible, great sizes. To Josh's point again, Brian and I were having an argument about the Perpetual 42 yesterday because I thought it was just fantastic. I love IWC Perpetuals. It was always just not the most comfortable watch to wear. And I think in the 42 size, it's awesome. There is some pushback on the moving of the moon. That is definitely kind of was their iconic thing, was their moon at 12. But I think a 42 size and the 40 on the core, I think it's going to make it more wearable for most people. And I'm going to, love to see that in person. I think my biggest disappointment was my favorite brand, of course, Lange. Only did 2 intros. The one minute repeater, incredible, 30 pieces. But 449,000 euro. That's a big nut for a piece like that when you can get a Patrik minute repeater for considerably less. I think they overreached on the numbers on that, and we always wonder going back, where do you come up with a retail price on a piece like that? But that one seemed a little heavy.
It's not on a dartboard there.
Well, I think,
it's possible.
What my biggest takeaway is, the watches are nice, but I really highly doubt a lot of their resale value already. So if you think about what an IWC Portuguese Perpetual brings pre-owned, or Mike, you talk about Lang & Son, half of these great, fantastic complications that they have are worth half to 40% off.
Incredible.
So is that minute repeater that's $500,000? Well, it's already worth $250,000. Or that perpetual that comes out, it's already 50% less the very minute you put it on your wrist, compared to a lot of these other brands today, like an Audemars or a Rolex or a Patek or a Journe, or many brands that they just don't have that depreciation. And now these great launches are great, but more and more, you're all on the phone. How many of you guys are getting calls from clients already saying, like, I can wonder what that's going to be worth, or should I buy that perpetual? Boy, I took a real beating on the last one. So I think there's 2 sides of this: how great the watches are, which we love, and then there's just, very, very, massive depreciation the very minute you put it on your wrist. So I don't know how that's going to start to affect.
I think it's interesting because, even in this crisis, to your point with Lange, they've always depreciated. We're probably having the strongest Lange month we've ever had in history. I think partially because the prices are at a point now where the value is amazing.
I agree. There's no better value. When I look at what we're selling, these are just so fantastic for the consumer now that what they're getting is just I think a great value compared to what, you know, these pieces brought at the boutiques.
Yes, and I think we're going to see it, I think, with like the IWC Portugieser. I think the new piece is so good and they brought it at a great value that I think it could hurt the existing market, because I think a lot of guys are going to trade in that watch for the new version. So
Look, I thought the Vacheron was, I thought the Vacheron Perpetual was fantastic that they just came out with, the ultra thin. I wish it would have come out a couple of years ago. Like I was talking to Brian about it yesterday. It's like a, you know, but I think for that watch, it's sleek. It's, I mean, you know, they should do okay with that.
the sizing, everybody was resizing, going classic, wearable. There was great price points, but I think the biggest take for me was that they actually did the launch. I was so disappointed with Patek and Rolex, who said, no, we're not going to show new product right now, when I think it's the most important time to show new product, to create interest, to keep their customers and us engaged. I mean, here we are doing a full show because Watches and Wonders happened, and it's something new to keep us moving and going forward and figuring out where the market's going to go. So I think I love the launch. I love the concept of the launch. Again, it'll get better every time, I think. But I really hope, and Journe did it yesterday too, which was great. I mean, how many calls did you get, Brian, because Journe went online yesterday? I mean, it's incredible.
You know, everybody's going nuts for it. And I think, though, you know, it creates a conversation now with a client, a phone call that may not have happened. You know, somebody gets interest, they're talking about the watch, it leads to a different place. But, you know, I think that each brand has to make its own decision, what's right for itself and for its clients. I think a brand like Patek Philippe, who is still delivering its Basel product from last year and hasn't fully rolled that out, to go and release new product now, it's hard because
I look at it a little different. I think that I would have liked the brands to have waited an extra month, because look, they're launching it, and we're open in a way. We are talking to our clients, and Brian is able to engage, and so are you, Mike and Josh and Patrik. But how about all the retailers that are sitting at home? Their stores aren't open, and don't forget, a lot of the brands that are launching at Watches and Wonders, they're just going direct. They're receiving emails from clients. Some of them are open, some of them are taking calls, I don't know. But to me, it really leaves the retailer out at a time that they're mostly closed. So yes, you get to say, wow, that was a great launch by IWC. But you don't really have the details of the watch. You can't really talk to that many clients about it. You have no idea of delivery. I think it was really, to some extent, self-serving for the brands at the detriment of the retailer.
Go ahead, Patrik. Yeah, I want to hear.
I have some opinion there. I'm bringing again the manufacturer in, you know, in the situation they are in. I was thinking about what you're saying, Danny, but I see it a bit different. The problem for the brands is they have to decide now what they're going to produce and in which speed they're going to produce what. So they need the feedback from the shows. Now, end of April, beginning of May was already late for them anyway. Now, they have to, once they're going to start their manufacturers again, this week, next week, going on, they need to know in which direction they go with their production. For that, they need feedback. Because now, you know, the Swiss, they close again in July because they have their watchmaker holidays, and I think they're going to do it again this year. They're not going to work through the summer because that's the holy cow for them. So they need to know now where they have to produce, where they have to make reorders for with their sub-suppliers for which parts, and they couldn't wait any longer. They needed that feedback as soon as possible. I think that's part of the reason.
Awesome. All right. I think that's a great point, Patrik, and I love the perspective coming from the heartland of Switzerland. Wrap it up there, guys. I think we covered a lot of ground. I do think it's great that they did the lunch, because again, it got us all together and engaging, and we continue to engage with our clients. Please make sure you check out our Instagram live Monday, Wednesday, Friday this week. We're always on there, some great content there. please continue to reach out, email, contact, phone us. We love to talk watches, and we're going to keep doing this as long as we're quarantined and probably afterwards. So that's our edition of Zoom After Hours, and we'll hope to see you the next time.